Welcome to the Bringing Intimacy Back Show, where intimacy is real. If you desire to intimately connect with yourself, your significant other, children, family, friends, community, and your higher power, this show is for you. Thus, we explore intimate topics, inspiring life stories, spirituality, and insightful tips on strengthening relationships. This show is hosted by Dr. April and her co-host, Dr. Kelly. Now let's get this episode of the Bringing Intimacy Back Show started, because we share with you the secret power to intimacy to create a life you love, or love the life you create. Now here's your host, Dr. April, and co-host, Dr. Kelly.
Welcome to the Bringing Intimacy Back Show, where intimacy is real. How are you doing, Dr. Kelly?
I'm doing well. I'm a little apprehensive. I have a party tomorrow at my house. It's my first party. My friends from high school are coming, and I'm not much taller.
Okay, yes. But I think they're going to be fine with you, you know?
Oh, yeah. I'll just, you know what? Throw a log on the fire and throw them in the hot tub. How could they possibly not enjoy that party?
Yes, definitely. You know,
earlier escape the fire for the hot tub, that is.
Yes, yeah. Earlier this week, I was extremely nervous. And so guess what I did? I took a walk in my neighborhood. Yes. And then I found, I'm one who really likes to be outside. And then I found this quiet little bench. I've been in this neighborhood for, I think, maybe 8 years, but I'd never seen this bench before. And you know what I did? I sat down and I talked with my higher power.
Wow.
Yes.
Can you imagine if that was just, how many times you walked by that bench and never noticed it before?
No. And so I am really excited about today's topic because as many of us are going through, and especially myself, we're going through transitions.
Yes.
Many times we do not know how to talk. And today's topic is sitting with God.
Oh, it couldn't be more timely for me. And it sounds like it is for you. You've already done it once this week. Here's your second time.
Yes.
You're going higher, Dr. April.
Yes, I need to do it much more than that. Yes. But let me introduce you to our expert on sitting with God, Richard Lewis. Hi, Richard.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes. So Richard is an expert, an author, a speaker, and a coach who focuses on centering prayer as that inner transformation. And for us at the Bringing Intimacy Back, we talk a lot about intimacy, that interconnection, that center. And he teaches centering prayer in both local and virtual communities, one-on-one, online. He has a newest book, which is called Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer. He publishes weekly meditations, book reviews, and a lot of different things. And he says he's been doing this centering prayer since June 1st of 2014, which is almost 7 years ago. I have to look and count. Yes. So welcome to the show. And my first question to you is, why is June 1st, 2014 so important?
I don't know what was so magical about that date. I had stumbled across, maybe that's not the right word, but it found me, the practice itself found me in late 2013 in a book that I was perusing, just looking for a book on Amazon. And I started reading a book called Healing the Divide, Recovering Christianity's Mystic Roots by Amos Smith. And in his book, he talked about a practice called centering prayer, which is a silent prayer, wordless prayer practice he had been doing for about 15 years or so up until that point. And it immediately intrigued me because I'd always been attracted to silence. I just didn't really know what to do in the silence. So there was a practice I could do in the silence. So I began trying it out. And then I decided what was so significant about June 1, and I don't know why, other than maybe I was just ready, is June 1st, I decided I was going to, I'll call it jump in the centering prayer swimming pool and practice it twice a day, 20 minutes each time as much as possible to get, the benefits of the practice. So I guess June 1st, I was probably just ready. I had been practicing silence, but maybe not daily and maybe not twice a day and maybe not as long as 20 minutes. And something clicked inside me that said that let's just do this and that's commit to it. And it just so happened to be June 1, 2014 when I made that decision.
Awesome. Yes. And so what is silent prayer? And I know you even have a website called silentteachers.com, but what is silent prayer?
Sure. So centering prayer, which is a form of silent prayer, which is wordless prayer, I'll give a brief history. It's been around since the early 1970s. It was created actually by three Trappist monks. So three Catholic priests saw other forms of meditation happening, and they wanted something for the Christian community. So they kind of challenged themselves to create a practice. And one of the priests, Father William Meninger, was reading an old, I think it's a 14th century book, I might be getting the year wrong, called The Cloud of Unknowing. And in it, he found kind of the method of centering prayer. So centering prayer itself, and I'll say, and I'll also tell you how you do it, because people are wondering, all right, well, how do you do it? So it's been around since the early 1970s. And it was created as kind of a reaction to that's create something for the Christian community. So how you do it is you sit comfortably with your eyes closed. To begin your time, you introduce a word interiorly of one or two syllables. So it could be God, it could be ocean, it could be love, it could be Jesus. And that signifies your opening to the presence and actions of God within. And then you begin your silent sit. And then whenever you begin engaging your thoughts, and what I mean by that is whenever you think about what you're doing before your sit, or you begin thinking about what you're going to do after your sit. Maybe you're going to go to the mall. Maybe you're going to watch a movie. You begin to realize you're no longer sitting with God. You're sitting with your thoughts and your planning and your plotting. You reintroduce that word to come back to the present moment and the purpose of your time of sitting with God and opening to the presence and actions of God within. And you do that as long as you're doing your silent sit. So if you've chosen 10 minutes, you'll do that. And you'll use your sacred word when needed. And it's not used as a mantra. So there are mantra-based practices. Centering prayer is not a mantra where you're repeating it. You're only using it when needed. So sometimes you naturally bring yourself back. Other times you realize you're doing a lot of planning and plotting and strategizing, and you reintroduce the word to come back to the present moment. So that's a little bit about the history of how long it's been around, how it was created, and how you do it.
It sounds like it's so personal. And so many of us are just, it's hard to slow down. You know, yeah, I think of that scripture that says, be still and know that I am God, and how hard it is for me to be still. I know that he's God, but for me, that being still part is difficult. What would you say to people that have a hard time slowing down enough to be silent and have these centering prayers?
Sure. Yes, I mean, it can be difficult for people just to slow down because you think you need to be doing something. So for those that are, it's new, the idea is new, I would encourage them to take baby steps so they don't have to start with 20 minutes, as I said. And I didn't start with 20 minutes. So I would even start with one minute to 5 minutes of sitting in silence and seeing how it goes, and then slowly increasing the time. And then after you're comfortable with it, and you maybe have established a 1 month sitting habit, I'll call it, then add a second sit at some point later in the day, or depending upon when you sit. I sit first thing in the morning before I do anything, and then I begin my day. And then my second sit is usually before lunch, because the interior reservoir has run dry, and I need to reset and reconnect myself to life, reconnect myself to God. I do a second sit, and then I find that the second half of the day continues well and as strong as perhaps the first time. So that's what I would encourage people: is take baby steps, start small, do it once. Maybe do it first thing in the morning, and just do it for a few minutes and work your way up.
Yeah, I was just thinking as I was hearing that, many people are so used to, when they pray, they talk to God. They just say a lot of words and praise and ask him for things. But when you're sitting there, what happens to you when you're not actually, praising him or talking to him? What actually happens?
Sure. So what I think of it as a reverse prayer, because you're connecting with God at a deeper level beyond thoughts and emotions. I think of it as a reverse prayer. God is praying in you what you need. And that might be inner peace and calm. It might be wisdom for tasks. It might be nudges to get out of your comfort zone. So you can equate it to a lot of times when you're just taking a walk with a friend, nobody's talking, you're just with each other. Or if you're sitting on the porch with a friend or a spouse or significant other, you don't always have to have words. You're just together and you like being that with that person. So it's similar to that, where you're sitting with someone, no words required. But at the same time, with sitting with God, God's acting at us at a deeper level internally. So that's why we use our sacred, when we engage our thoughts, we let go of thoughts and things we tell ourselves that aren't true. A lot of times we might feed fear into ourselves or worrying or anxiety. We let go of all of that and open up to God and the things God wants from us. Which I don't think are fear and anxiety. God wants us to enjoy life and go and do things and get out of our comfort zones and try and do new things. So that's really what happens in centering prayers. You're letting go of who you are not, the things you tell yourself that aren't true, and open up to God, who wants you to have a beautiful, wonderful life. And live from what I call your true self, the person God wants you to be. You connect to that person during centering prayer, the person God wants you to be and the life God wants you to enjoy.
So Rich, what is your view of God?
Sure.
Because the reason I ask that is for people that are listening, God is very, very intimidating. So tell us your view of God, and then I want to hear yours also, Dr. April.
Sure, and I know people's idea of God is all over the place. So many years ago, the idea of God for me, and this is probably going back 30 or 40 years, was God was outside of me, looking down at me, criticizing me, judging me, maybe saying you're not hitting the mark, or you need to do better. And as a result of centering prayer and sitting with God, God has changed for me. So God is no longer up in the sky, looking down at me, angry at me. God is a lot of things. First of all, God is within me. I'm not God, and I don't claim to be God, but God is within me, and I'm connecting to God during my silent sit. But God is also, behind me, pushing me forward in life, holding my hand, walking with me. And God is ahead of me, kind of pulling me forward and nudging me to get out of my comfort zone. But for me, God is just this beautiful presence, loving presence that loves me and wants nothing but it's not a prosperity God, and that's not what I mean, but just a God who truly loves me, but is also within me as well, and is not angry at me, and just loves me.
Oh, that's a beautiful view of God. It's intimate. That's intimate.
But that's not everybody's, and I get it. Some people that I've talked to that want to practice centering prayer, it is scary because they think they're sitting with a God who's angry at them, and they have to. It can take a lot of time to get over that type of reaction and over that type of God that they've been living with.
Oh yes. What about you, Dr. April? What's your view of God? It's like she's frozen up. My view of God, originally, they say that your view of God is often your view of your earthly father. So I had a hard time in my prayers and in my silent prayers and sitting with God, asking for things. My prayers of supplication were very, very difficult for me. And so then as I grew in my relationship with him, and that really involved conversation, listening to him, that's the quiet part, right? And then communicating back with him. So to me, it is a very personal experience. How would you encourage people to take that first step?
So just in terms of God,
in towards of centering prayer. So we could just capsulize for those that are listening that, this is a centering, these are centering prayers. It's an intimate relationship. It can go from 1 minute to 20 minutes. It's a daily practice, right? But they're still a little intimidated, but they're gonna try. So how would you encourage them to start?
I mean, all of that, quite frankly. So it starts, make it the first thing you do as you begin your day. Make it 1 minute or 2 minutes if you find that's just going to be extremely difficult. And just come as you are and show up and do your sit. Don't judge your sit. If you can't fail at centering prayer. If you show up, you've done it right. And if you've had a lot of thoughts, that's okay. That's why you have your sacred word to return to and bring yourself back to the present moment. So it's really just a prayer that you really can't fail at. If you don't show up, that's the only way you fail, but that doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means forgive yourself and show up for your next time. Show up next morning. Don't beat yourself up. Just show up the next morning. So that's what I would tell people. Just be kind and gentle with yourself, because God is patient and will wait for you to show up next time. If you don't come the first time, God's not going to get angry. He'll, spirit, or whatever you want to call God, higher power, spirit, he or she will patiently wait for you to show up for your next sit, and is delighted when you show up.
I think of it like the way you just described that is like if I go to visit somebody, I'm like, I don't have a lot of time. I'm just home for a little bit during my vacation, but they'd be happy with just a cup of coffee. It doesn't need to be a full hour. And so by showing up, then I can have that opportunity to have that intimate conversation with them. So instead of saying like to some people that one of my mentors is Ron Hutchcraft. He's written a lot of books. He does on Woody Radio, A Word with You, 5 minutes, a word with you. And he says that but the main thing is just approaching God. And when we work with Native Americans, they're in different other cultures, they're like praying is for priests. How do I approach this God? And Ron Hutchcraft always says conversation. Instead of using the word prayer, which can be so intimidating, depending upon your past history. I was going to add church in there. The history with the church and how we approach God, it can be very fearful. So let's have a conversation with God, right? It sounds to me that these silent prayers, it's him speaking to you and you speaking to him. It's a two-way conversation, Rich.
Well, it's really not it's more of a sitting, as my book says, sitting with God. So it's just a different way to pray. So there's verbal prayer where you're talking to God.
No, it's all internal, correct?
This is all internal. So you're sitting with God and you're just letting go of your thoughts and emotions and just opening to God and just sitting with God and letting God act in us at a deeper level. And you notice that outside of your prayer time. So you're not going to notice how this type of silent meditation, and two things I'll say is it is meditation, but it's also a relationship with God. So it's really considered two things: meditation and really a way of just deepening your relationship with God. So it is prayer, but it's silent prayer with it beyond words and thoughts and emotions, and letting God act in you at a deeper level, and then noticing how it has changed you outside of your prayer time, over the long haul. And the other thing I'll say, though, is don't give up your other forms of prayer. And I pray verbally. I do other types of prayer. This is just another way to pray that can complement and enrich your prayer life and maybe even deepen it.
I get this visual of, how when somebody whispers, people listen. So it's a different type of a communication, like you're actually being still, and you might be able to hear God's voice much louder. Because, or you're leaning in to listen to him, right? When we come back from break, we'll talk a little bit more about this and the posturing of that prayer and what it looks like. I have a few questions on that, and we'll also take some questions from the audience.
Are you wanting a vacation in paradise? A vacation to rekindle the passion? A vacation without the kids? A vacation where you can learn how to communicate, where you and your partner actually hear each other and gain insight? If so, vacation counseling is your next vacation. Dr. April Brown has created vacation counseling in Southwest Florida as a perfect option for you and your partner. Our retreats are one couple at a time. We have a variety of packages available to choose from, including virtual couples retreats. If you and your partner are interested in the vacation counseling, Please visit us at vacationcounseling.com for more information on pricing and packages. Also, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. To keep track of the latest news, stories, activities, or coupons on vacation counseling and Dr. April's other services, we encourage you to sign up to receive a monthly newsletter called Intimate Connections at draprilbrown.com. Remember, if you and your partner are struggling with communication and intimacy, and you all are looking for a retreat to connect, vacation counseling can be your next vacation in Southwest Florida.
Welcome back to the Bringing Intimacy Back show, where intimacy is real, and we're with Rich Lewis, the author of many books, but especially talking today about silent prayers and centering prayers. Welcome back, Dr. April Brown.
Yes, my lights and everything went out, so sorry about that. I don't know. We'll
Southwest
see.
Florida, sunny Southwest Florida. We've just been digging a little bit deeper into the prayer, and that it really is a different style of prayer, but it is with your higher power and God. And then how we have many different impressions of who God is. And sometimes that can be based on our personal relationship with our biological father, who, if they have been punitive, then you're expecting that you have done something wrong and you shall be punished. And then, but just know this, it may be your view of God, but that's truly not who God is. So we're digging a little bit deeper here about this. So Rich, what's something that we haven't really talked about yet that you think is very significant to this approach to prayer?
I guess I would say I guess it requires discipline. It's not easy, and look for the fruits of the practice really outside of the prayer time. So maybe I can just share, like for me, now that I've been doing it since June of 2014, and if I look at who was I prior to that, and who am I now, and how has God transformed me through the whole process. I clearly see that I'm a much more confident person in myself. I'm more excited to live life. I'm more willing to get out of my comfort zone and try and do new things. I'm a calmer and less reactive person. I'm still a work in progress, but I can stop myself and listen instead of reacting as quickly as I did in the past, and more willing just to hear people and hear what they have to say and not react, and realize that what they have to say is important. So the letting go you do in centering prayer comes with you into your everyday life. Is the neat thing about this type of prayer, is you learn to let go of things that you don't need to do, or that aren't important to you, or anxiety and fear, and then hone in and focus on the things you need to do. Because I think earlier I mentioned, I do a second sit, and I've had many people will say, I don't have time, I can't do this, I'm too busy. And I'll tell them, just try it and trust me, it has a way of giving you back time. And I notice it, every time I do a second sit and then look back at the end of the day, how my day went. It was productive because I took the time for a second sit. So just like you let go during centering prayer, the second half of the day, I let go of the things I don't need to do, and I can hone in and focus on what I need to do. And I end up being pretty productive. And I think it's because I took the time for a silent sit. So it has a way of giving you back time. So those are some things that you notice over time is the fruits of the practice, and what God graces you with. And it tends to be unique for each practitioner. And then just how it has a way of giving you back time outside of your centering prayer, and how it helps you let go outside of your practice as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking how you just said, it also gives you energy and direction, because when you slow it down, then you get to refresh. And when you're centering and you're hearing him, and you hear him more throughout the day, that gives you that sense of direction, which of course would lower anxiety and of course, lower depression.
Right. I mean, it's kind of a byproduct of the practice. So if you, Thomas Keating was really one of the founders of centering prayer, and he said something similar to, if you do it, it will do you, and that's really God. But over time, if this type of prayer or any type of contemplative practice like this, over time, heals you and transforms you. It just does. And if you do it, it will do you. You just have to, just show up to your practices. And even if you don't want to show up, that's just a thought or emotion, and let go of it and show up anyhow.
I tell my students, and I'm a professor, and I'm like, you can only fail if you don't show up.
Right.
I mean, and that's really, it's not 1,000% truth, but there's a lot of truth to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think through this, you get a lot of fruits from it. I know for myself, direction, clarity. Yeah. What fruits have you received from doing this practice?
Sure. I mean, a ton of confidence in myself. Just a couple of years ago, I would have been scared to death to be sitting on a call with you folks. So like after my book came out, I've been on at least 50, if I've added up 50 plus podcasts. I would have been terrified to do that. I do guest speaking in front of small and large groups. I would have been scared to do that. So just confidence to do things like that. The idea of writing a book. I mean, I never had written anything in school, probably more than 6 pages or so. when Amos Smith, who I've become friends with, he was the gentleman that wrote that book that I mentioned earlier, where I discovered centering prayer. He and I are friends, and we've been friends since about 2013. He was the one that challenged me to write this book, and then kind of helped me through the book process. So the fruits are really just confidence, excitement for life, getting out of my comfort zone, and sharing with the world, my gifts and how I can help people, and at least introduce them to this type of prayer and see if it's something that can help them. It's not, there's plenty of contemplative practices. So if this practice doesn't work for them, there are other practices, and I share them with other people. But for me, it's resonates with me and has worked really well with me. So I'm going to continue digging deep in the centering prayer well, I'll call it.
So there needs to be order and consistency.
Right. For I think for any type of practice like that, if you want to try to do it daily, once or twice a day, and just keep at it. But again, forgive yourself if you don't show up and you miss a day. Just forgive yourself, move on, and show up the next day.
Think of this like a relationship. It's a relationship, right? Intimacy with our Savior, with ourselves, with other people. It includes consistency, communication, sender receiver, sitting and listening sometimes to people without interrupting, right?
Exactly. It's really all of that. I mean, it teaches us how to do that. It says if we can sit in silence with ourselves and with God or our higher power or spirit or whatever you want to call it, it teaches us how to do that with other people, and how to sit with other people and be with other people and listen and accept everybody's diversity and different ways of doing things and different opinions. So it teaches us how to do that.
I think it's probably scary to people because we don't understand ourselves, and being still is difficult. It's a lot easier to divert attention to other people than to deal with some of the stuff that we don't understand within ourselves. And certainly when you add the God to it, that can scare people. But slowing down, I have to tell you, I'm going to look into this a little bit more, because I've been moving way too fast in life, just way too fast. I used to have morning quiet time every day for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I would say, I guess if you can just be, then you're better at your doing. I mean, you'll tend to notice that if you can just learn to be once a day for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, then you're better at your doing.
Mm-hmm. And kind of like what Dr. Kelly was saying, there's a lot of people that have a hard time sitting, but part of it is because their thoughts keep going so fast. And a lot of the thoughts that keep going fast are judgmental to themselves. And I know you said earlier about forgiveness of self. So for both of you, what do you suggest to people who try to sit, and then there's these thoughts that come in that said, remember what you did last night, remember this, remember that, watch out for this. What do you say to them on how to quiet those thoughts or how to just let those thoughts, I don't know. I tell them, let it flow like the clouds. Yeah.
I mean, and that's why you have the sacred word. So when that happens, you let go of them and come back to your sacred word to bring you back to the present moment, and then you let go of your sacred word. So if you have to continuously return to your sacred word, what seems like a million times, you keep doing it. So sometimes you'll notice you have to use your sacred word a ton of times. Other times you notice you don't have to use it that often, and you naturally bring yourself back. And then there might even be those times where you didn't fall asleep, but you're not sure where you went. You kind of entered the spaces between your thoughts. So that can happen. At least I've noticed that in my prayer time. Sometimes I have racing thoughts and I have to continuously use the sacred word. Sometimes I can naturally bring myself back when I catch myself engaging thoughts and planning. And then there's other times where I was completely in between my thoughts and I didn't fall asleep. And you might fall asleep during silent sit, and that's okay if you do. You might have needed the nap. But so that's what you do. That's the purpose of the sacred word, is just when you have these racing thoughts, that's when you reintroduce your sacred word. And it also doesn't have to be like, I actually use an image. You can use a word if you're more of an auditory person. You can use an image if you're more of a visual person. You can use your breath. Some people use their breath because they're more physical people. And some people are afraid they'll fall asleep. So they keep their eyes open and stare at a spot 5 or 6 feet, perhaps on the floor. So you can use, multiple sacred methods. And the last thing I'll say is I've spoken to some people that have attention deficit disorder. So they said, this is just impossible for me. Then I'll tell them, you can do this walking. You can take a walk and do centering prayer. Obviously, you'll keep your eyes open and pay attention to where you're walking, but you can walk and do centering prayer, because as you're thinking and engaging your thoughts, you can still use your sacred word or a sacred picture in your mind, and you can walk and do centering prayer if you need to, because you just can't sit still.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned those other things, because I was curious why, when you said it originally, it was 1 or 2 syllabus words. And so I was curious on why just 1 or 2 syllabus.
Just to keep it simple, because if it's too long of a word, then you're focusing on that. And the other thing I'll say is you want to keep it the same method during your sit. So you don't want to change your word so where it might be blue and then the next word is red. Then you're going to spend more time in your mind thinking, oh, what should my next sacred method be? And then you're really not sitting with God. You're sitting with your sacred thoughts and methods. And so you use the same method during your sit, and it's easier if it's 1 or 2 syllables. It just makes it easier.
For me, it wouldn't be pizza, because then I'd be thinking about food.
Right. Then that's another good point you're making, is you want it to be, it's not a word where you think, oh, and you think about pizza the whole time. Then you need to change your word.
It's just good. I know it's not similar, but it reminds me of like Lamaze, how they bring in something that they're supposed to focus on. It could be just like a banana, or who's to know what it is, but and how many people it actually calms them down by focusing on that. So pick that wisely and choose this word wisely. But the main thing is that it seems like everything that you've explained so far, Rich, is that this is a personal event you can go to daily that'll help center yourself. And it doesn't have to do with confessing, like our typical confessing of sins, or sometimes in prayer. This seems to me that it's almost very intimate.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, it truly is. You're just sitting with God, and you're coming as you are, and God's accepting you as you are, or at least that's where I'm at. And I know that that's not where everybody is at. So for me, I'm now at the point where I'm just sitting with a presence that I know loves me. And I'm also thinking of, as I sit with God, and then I get up and walk with God, and God comes with me as I continue the day. So it's not goodbye, God, I'll see you at my next sit. It's God's coming with me, and this presence, powerful, loving presence, is coming with me as well. And the same posture, letting go posture, comes with me outside of my silent sit.
Yes. And like she says, it is very intimate. However, do people do this with groups, or no? It's very individually?
No, you can actually. Yeah, I'm glad you're asking that question. So obviously, most people practice it on their own, but there are so the group. Centering Prayer was created in the early 1970s, and then about 10 years later, the Contemplative Outreach Organization was created. So they have a website called contemplativeoutreach.org, and Thomas Keating was really one of the main founders. But then what they began doing is different groups began being created all throughout the different states in the US as well as internationally. So different groups will practice. Pre-COVID, they were practicing either in churches or in different buildings. So maybe once a week, the group would meet, and whoever would get together would practice together. Now they're doing them via Zoom. So no, you can practice this alone, but you can also do it in community, in a room with others, and you can also do it on Zoom with 75 to 100 people in a Zoom meeting doing centering prayer, which is pretty neat, actually.
Renew your connection and your love in beautiful Costa Rica. February 27th through March 3rd, 2022. We'll make sure it happens. Vacation Counseling Intimate Couples Retreat. Your next vacation. Enroll now at vacationcounseling.com.
Hey, welcome back to the Bring It Intimacy Show, where intimacy is real. And we've been talking with Rich Lewis about sitting and just listening with God. Richard, we do have a question from the audience. Her name is Mary, and she's calling, or she texted in from Texas. And she said, due to this, season that we're in, she's experiencing a lot of grief. And she's wondering, would this practice help her get through the grief process?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say it definitely can. Because what you'll do is you'll come as you are to this silent sit, including your grief, and then you'll let go of it and open to God. I don't know where the caller is at, but centering prayer really becomes, Thomas Keating, one of the main centering prayer founders, considered it divine therapy, because what can happen during centering prayer is as you keep showing up to your sits, your bodies hold a ton of tension and your minds hold a lot of thoughts, and many of the thoughts are also repressed. So it becomes a safe place where you unload all the tension in your body, and repressed thoughts come out. So it's a safe place for that to happen. And that, over the long haul, that's really kind of true freedom, if you think about it. We don't need to hold on to all this tension in our bodies, and we don't need to hold on to grief and thoughts and repressed emotions. So over time, he called it divine therapy. We're healed, mind, body, and heart over the long haul from this type of practice. So I would definitely say, yes, this type of practice can help with grief, and she could be holding grief anywhere within her body, mind, or heart. And so this type of practice can heal. It can be very healing.
Okay. I'm curious, after you go through that experience, whether it's a minute, 5 minutes, or 20 minutes, what are your thoughts about capturing or journaling after going through something like this, so you can remember what happened?
Sure. I would do it, obviously after. So during centering prayer, you're letting go. And that's really what you're doing during the practice, is just letting go of thoughts and emotions, but you're obviously allowing it to happen. So some people might experience what we call unloading, where suddenly some traumatic experiences are coming up and coming out of them. So, and you're kind of sitting with it and then letting go of it. But yes, outside of your practice, journaling is not a bad practice to do after your sit, or at any other point in time other than your sit, where you're just journaling your thoughts and what maybe came up in centering prayer and how you feel about it. So no, I think journaling, and that's something I think I wish I need to do more of, because journaling can be very, very powerful.
Yeah, I noticed myself that when, and I've feel like I've had times where I've sat with God. But when I journal it, I can remember it. You know what I'm saying? And so years later or a month later, when you look back, you
Mhm.
sometimes can gain some more perspective for what
Sure.
you went through. Yeah.
And actually, I'll make one point on that. I guess I kind of do mini journaling. I'm a big believer in affirmations. So these are single sentence statements of things I want to do, either mentally in my mental health or physical health or work or family related, or even with the work I do with my website. So they're single sentence statements of things that I want to do. And I read them before my centering sit, and I give them to God, and then I let them go. And then I go into my silent sit. So I consider it I'm partnering with God on these affirmations, and I consider them my true self affirmations of what God and I together want to do. And they remain an affirmation. You know, if I still have an excitement about them, if I have inner peace and calm about them, they're allowed to be out of my comfort zone, and then they should be in some of them. And then lastly, as long as they don't harm me or harm others, they stay. So I guess I do kind of a mini version of journaling where I'm reading these to God, and then going into my sit and letting them brew with God and I together. And often I read them kind of before I go to bed and let them brew at night while I sleep as well.
And so do you do your affirmations verbally out, or do you say them in your mind? And
Both,
things like the
actually.
meditation. Okay.
Sometimes both. Sometimes I just read them. Other times I talk them aloud. And many times if I'm driving, like, and I'm alone, I'll just say them out loud, just to say them. So I say them in my car. I said them this morning. I was going to the dentist for a routine teeth cleaning 20 minutes away. So I kind of have them memorized. So I was speaking them out loud, and then working my way through them as I rode to the dentist. If anyone was watching me, they probably either thought I was singing or thought I was crazy. So
Rich, I have a question from the audience. It's Danielle, and she's a mother in Michigan, and she wanted to know if this is something that you can do with your family.
Sure, that's a good question. Yes, actually, you can do it together, all together. And the neat thing is, when I first started doing this, my second sit used to be in the evening after dinner. So my kids, two of my kids, and I guess the one was 4, my son was 4, and my daughter was 12 at the time. They wanted to know what I was doing. I seemed to be going in the basement for about 30 minutes every night. So I invited them down, and they watched. And then, of course, they both wanted their own one-on-one time. So I used to do a 1-minute sit with my 4-year-old. And then I used to do about a 5-minute sit with my daughter, who was 12 at the time. So yes, the answer to that question is you can do it with your significant other, but you can also do it with children, and you can kind of scale it for them. For my 4-year-old, 1 minute made sense, and he enjoyed that. For my daughter, 5 minutes made sense. And actually, what I used to do with her, she just didn't know. And it's probably amazing that a 12-year-old girl could be quiet for that long. She centered with her eyes open because she was afraid she'd fall asleep. But I used to just say, "How long do you want to go?" And she'd say 5 minutes. And then I would just actually add like 2 minutes to the timer. And she never knew. So she never knew she was doing a couple minutes more than what she said.
That's beautiful. What a beautiful visual of a father with their child. And that's like how I view prayer. It's me
Great.
with my father.
And my son and I made it fun. Like, we lit a candle together, and then we read. I used Contemplative Outreach has an app for the timer, and we just read a sentence together. It says, "I open my heart to your love." And then we would do the 1-minute sit, and we actually were lying down on a couch, and he had his head on my chest, which I loved. And then the bell would go off, signifying 1 minute ended. Then we get up, just blow the candle out together, and that's what we did. And then for my daughter, we would do this sit, and then just spend some time talking, just catching up on life in general. So yes, it's kind of a neat way of spending time with your kids as well, and you can kind of give it the activities that each kid needs as part of that practice, either before or after the sit.
I'm just fascinated by that. And let's do an antithetical approach here for a moment. Rich, how do you feel that if this were not in your life, where would you be today if you haven't taken the last 7 years to be this exact and contemplative and persistent about this relationship? Where do you think you'd be?
I just wouldn't be as confident. I'm definitely a lot more confident. So I know he said that was one of the fruits. So I would say I would have been much less confident, but not only, with some of the things that I'm doing as a result of my practice of getting on shows and podcasts, writing the book and coaching and speaking, but also I have a regular day-to-day job. I'm a much more confident person in my job and more, and I interact with corporate accounts. I'm a much more confident person as I speak to them. So I think the biggest thing it's given me is really excitement to live life, the ability to be more present and less reactive, and then just a lot more confident. So I would be less confident, less excited, and less willing to get out of my comfort zone and be the old scared rich to try and do new things.
You're a humble man.
So I'm glad. I wish I had found it much sooner, but that's okay. I'm glad I maybe I wasn't ready for it. It came when I was ready, and I'm so grateful that I'm doing this practice.
Yeah, and I was just thinking it also can benefit your children because it keeps them, not keeps them, but it takes them away from screen time, Yes. Learning how to be okay with self and God, which many adults struggle with. So learning it at an early age is a blessing.
Agree, completely agree. And that reminds me, I taught it there was a local, Penn State has a local campus near me, and about 5 or 6 years ago, I was able to get on the campus, and there was a Christian group of 18 to 22-year-olds. So I was able to share centering prayer with them. And what I heard loud and clear from them was that they need silence, they need space, they need to turn off their phones, because Facebook and social media has created just so much chaos and trauma for them, because some people are putting terrible things on Facebook. Some things are very good, but they were just realizing that, oh my God, I need to slow down, and I got to turn my phone off, and I got to get off the TV, and I need to do this now more than ever. Because when I grew up, we didn't have any of those things, but now kids are growing up in a digital age, and everything is at our fingertips, and sometimes it's too much.
Definitely, yes. So if people are listening and they want to connect with you, how can they find you?
Sure. The best place is my website, silenceteaches.com. And if they subscribe to my website, they'll get a free ebook. It's a short ebook on centering prayer. That way they can learn a little bit more about it. And then if they want to further explore it, my book is on my website. If they want to further explore centering prayer and learn more about it. And I share in the book a lot about, how it has healed and transformed me. So I share my journey in the book for those that are further interested.
All right. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been amazing. Yes. And we really do appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Hopefully this was helpful for your community.
It's a reminder to me as well, not just our community, but I'm definitely going to slow down a little bit and try to incorporate this. I'm going to do a little bit of reading as well. And for those of you that are listening, thank you for being a part of the Bringing Intimacy Back show. Remember to follow us on Facebook, also our Instagram, and Apple Podcast. I guess we're, last I knew, we're in the top 200 for relationship podcast. We're so glad that we can be a part of your journey. And Dr. April, we have the Suarez next week, right?
Yes.
Yes. And then we're looking forward to that because that's on affair recovery. And then we have many other podcasts coming up to help you all grow in your relationship with yourself, God, your higher power, and others. So thank you for being with us today.
Yes. Thank you. And this has been the Bringing Intimacy Back show. See you guys next week.